Hi, you're watching Campus TV. I'm joined by Ollie Middleton. My name's Dominic Tucker. He's just been grilled by our students here from the university for the last hour or so. How did you find it? Did you enjoy it?
I really did enjoy it. It was really useful for me, and hopefully everyone else found it useful. There's some really good questions. So, you know, hopefully I was able to give the answers that people were looking for.
Obviously, the students here are very worried about tuition fees. That's the big one. Now, Labour have committed to £6,000 fees. Now, that's still double what they were last time Labour were in power. Now, why did you settle at 6,000? Why didn't you reduce them back to 3,000?
As I explained, it was largely down to the fact that we wanted these changes to come straight away. And it would have been a lot harder to do that if we reduced them to £3,000. Reducing them to 6,000, and it is a £3,000 reduction. Obviously, it is a £9,000 phase saving over 3 years. You know, that will make a difference. You know, it allowed us to bring those reforms in straight away, and obviously try and reverse some of the damage that's certainly been done, you know, in the eyes of individual students.
So, is there a plan in the more long term to reduce fees further?
Well, we're going to continue to assess the viability of a graduate tax. That's something that Middleton is on record as saying. That's something we will do. We you know, we are able to form a Labour government. So, you know, long term, I certainly wouldn't rule it out. But short term, obviously, I think it's a fantastic policy and a big step in the right direction.
Okay, we also heard about the cost of living in Bath. Now, I feel it as a student in Bath, it's a very expensive area. Do you think it's unfair that we don't get extra money like the students living in London, even though the cost of living must be reasonably similar in terms of the housing and the cost of drinks?
Yeah, I mean, I've got quite a good because I've got quite a good kind of base, because I obviously I'm in London some of the time. I've grown up in Bath. There is a difference. I have got to say, there is a difference. I mean, honestly, a night out in London will cost you twice as much, and London's just kind of on a whole new level. But to be honest, I do think it has to be seriously looked at. I mean, we obviously are committed to increasing grants by an average of £450. You know, I don't think we should definitely rule out further increases.
It seems like it would be a good way to get money going. We don't save much money as students.
I think even in London, you know, in my experience, it's still impossible to survive on the current, even the top loan and the grant included. You know, you have to try and get an income from elsewhere, whether that be a job or a family member or a friend contributing. Okay. So,
Labour have obviously committed, they talk about the NHS a lot. NHS privatisation seems to be a buzzword for Labour. What are you going to do to protect the NHS? What do you want to do to see improvements in that?
First and foremost, we're going to repeal the Health and Social Care Act. Okay. I mean, it was something I talked a bit about, obviously, in response to one of the questions. I mean, the Health and Social Care Act was incredibly damaging in a variety of ways. And, you know, the single worst part of it was that the government was completely disingenuous when they brought these reforms in. I mean, David Cameron was asked about NHS reforms during the election campaign. He said there would be no reorganisations of the NHS. It was a complete top-down reform, a £3 billion top-down reform that no one asked for and no one voted for. And they've been incredibly damaging. So we're going to repeal that legislation. The single most damaging part, perhaps, is the fact that it removes the cap on privatisation. So privatisation now can essentially be limitless. There's no end to it. So that's what we want to put an end to.
So why is a privatisation an issue? So long as it's free at the point of care, why on earth does it matter whether or not I'm getting it from a private company or
there are two reasons for that. One, I believe it undermines the core values of the NHS. You know, the fact that it's a public service. It should be a public service that's free at the point of use.
But it's free at the point of use, even if we privatise it.
If private companies are running an NHS service, to a large extent, it no longer becomes that public service.
But if it's free at the point of care and the private company can do it more efficiently for less money,
well, that takes me on to my second point. Often, actually, the costs of tendering out contracts are higher.
So why do we do it?
But what I personally believe is purely ideological. There's also a lot of concerns over the quality of care that these companies are providing. There's a lot of evidence that suggests actually the quality of care is far lower. So, you know, those are really the two factors there.
Okay. Sorry, I just picked up on you said it's ideological. Now, for me, if it's privatised, if certain sectors are contracted to private companies, and that delivers better care for less money, more efficiently, then it's ideological not to give it to them on the grounds that they're private companies.
But as I've said, it's not more cost effective, 90% of the time. Not only that, but the quality of care is lower. So that really there should be no reason for these contracts going to private companies. And as I said, we're incredibly lucky to have the NHS. It's completely unique. And obviously it is facing long-term pressures that we've got to face up to, but I do believe as a party we are able to provide answers to those longer-term questions. But it's completely unique, and we've got to protect it at all costs. And as I said, this kind of gradual move towards an increasingly privatised NHS does undermine the very existence of a national health service.
Okay. Moving on to the next point now, you're just 19 years of age.
Yeah.
So you've always grown up around New Labour. You've only ever really seen New Labour in power. Would you identify more with New Labour or Old Labour in your core values?
I think the main thing for me, and I mentioned it in my opening statement, is that Labour is a progressive party. That's always something that we've retained. And I always think that as a party we've been able to respond to the individual challenges of the time. I think that's something we were able to do in 1997, but let's remember, New Labour is Old Labour now. 1997 was 20 years ago. I think now we're just as progressive. We are able to provide answers to very different problems that we're facing now, and often those answers are different, as a result of the nature of the times we're living in. So, I don't think it's about kind of, really aligning myself with either. It's about aligning myself with a progressive party.
Okay. And I'm sort of, maybe, I feel as though maybe you're a bit more New Labour in your core value. You seem more right than old left-wing Labour. You're reasonably free market. You want £8 national minimum wage.
Well, that's something
that's barely an increase in real terms over 5 years.
Yeah, but that is
still pretty centre right.
No, but I mean that is something we've committed to. I mean, it is if you look at the current minimum wage, it is still a reasonable increase. I mean, there's no other political
How long's minimum wage been? £6.50 an hour for over 20 months.
It's for about. Well, for over 10 years.
So it's been stuck at the same amount. If we wanted it, surely if we want it at the same amount in real terms as it was when the minimum wage was first introduced, you'd be pushing for a much larger increase than by £1.50 over a 5 year period.
It is still a real terms increase though, and actually if you look
by a marginal amount,
but if you look on
it's not an increase in real terms.
If you look at the policies on offer from every single party, all five main political parties, none of them are offering an immediate increase. Well, certainly within reason, none of them are offering kind of a few pounds jump. I mean, it's got to be a gradual increase, I think. Okay.
But why £8? Why are you not pushing for a higher minimum wage?
Because I believe at this point, I think £8 is right. I think it will ensure that people are getting a fair day's pay for a fair day's work, but also.
So what's the living wage?
The living wage is £7.15, I believe.
So you're going to. What will that be after?
We're also going to encourage the living wage from the moment we get into government. So we're going to.
Can you define the living wage?
So the living wage outside of London is £7.
No, can you define what it is? Sorry.
The living wage is
how much we need to live.
Independently deemed as the amount of money. That you can live comfortably.
Why aren't we pushing for a living wage then?
Well, we are actually.
Why is it a different thing?
We are actually pushing for a living wage. We're offering companies that commit to a living wage tax breaks as an incentive. That's going to happen from the moment we get into government. We're continuing to support the Living Wage Foundation, other organisations pushing for a living wage as well. So we are supporting a living wage, but with a long-term view, with a long-term commitment to increasing that minimum wage to £8 an hour.
Okay, finally, you touched on sort of the political apathy in the country. You don't like the term apathy. Now, what do you think bringing a 19-year-old to be the Member of Parliament for Bath? What's that going to do for political engagement in the area? Are we going to enfranchise more students to be involved with politics, or do we not want to see our peers in politics?
I hope to encourage more young people to do what I can to make sure we are seeing more young people, certainly in Bath, engaged in politics. It's really important. But I mean, in terms of me personally, kind of somehow being the voice of young people, that's something I've never I've never suggested that I am. I think young people have to speak for themselves, young people have to be their own voice, but that's why we need more young people in politics. I think that's why we need more young people standing as candidates as well.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to thank Ollie for his time. It's been really interesting. You've been watching Campus TV. Thank you very much and good night.
Thank you.